Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon Lepcha, Assistant Professor in the Department of English. And today I'm going to present a short overview on Romanticism, or the Romantic Age, or the world of emotion, imagination, and nature. So today we'll be looking into these 3 points, that is, the iconic historical background of the Romantic Age, the characteristics of the literary age. We'll discuss how literature shifted from logic, reasoning to love, and from rules and regulations and order of the neoclassical period to raw emotions and imagination. Third one, the iconic writers, the major important writers of the period. So the Romantic period, the timeline is 1798 AD to 1837 AD. So the Romantic period, it precedes the Victorian era and it succeeds the Neoclassical age. So this Romantic age is said to be the return to nature. So as we already know, the French Revolution, the main aim or the objective of the French Revolution was to overthrow monarchy. So most of the Romantic writers, poets, they were highly influenced by the ideas of French Revolution. So the Romantic poets like Wordsworth, Coleridge, they promoted the freedom of an individual, which was kind of ideal adopted from French Revolution, where they focused on the freedom of an individual to express themselves, express their emotions and their imaginations, which was unlike the neoclassical age, where the writings were just focused on style and order. So the Romantic poets and writers, they also focused on emotion, imagination, individualism, and ultimately nature. Nature was the source for all these things. We see nature, we see Romantic poets like Wordsworth worshipping nature. Nature was just not the part of the environment, but nature was something divine for them. I can give you an example of the Prelude, where Wordsworth talks about his journey from childhood to adolescence and how nature has played a very important part in his life to nurture him. So the Romantic writers, they focused on emotion, imagination, individualism, and nature. Another important factor that influenced the Romantic writers was the Industrial Revolution. We all already know what is Industrial Revolution. That was the rapid growth of industrialization, rapid growth of industries, where many evils started to creep into the society. So many of the Romantic writers they were against industrialization. So they started to begin to explore social injustice, urban decay, urbanization, materialism, poverty, child labor, and dehumanization of labors. So with the growth of industries, people started to migrate to the urban areas. So when they started to do so, there was overpopulation in the urban areas, which led to unemployment and ultimately to poverty. So this was the time when people started to realize the importance of nature, importance of rural life. They started to migrate back to the country areas. That was the return to nature, which I was talking about earlier. So the writers started to focus on these social issues that was emerging due to industrialization. One best example I can tell you about the child labor is William Blake's Songs of Innocence and Experience, where he talks about the chimney sweeper, the child, okay, how he transformed from a very innocent child to an experienced one, how he was dehumanized, how they were dehumanized child labor, and how his parents gave away that child to work on the chimney because they were facing poverty. So these were some of the issues that the Romantic writers were also focusing on. So these writers started to point out the importance of nature. How important is a nature to for a human being? How does nature nurture a human being? How does nature develop a human being? They also highlighted on the importance of the connection of human beings Okay, connection of human beings with nature to keep humanity intact. And they started to focus on, again, emotion, individualism, nature, imagination, and the sublime. So next we move on to the literary characteristics of the Romantic age. So the Romantic age was the rejection of neoclassical style, that is, the neoclassicists, they were just the pseudo-classicists who were just the imitators of the classics, the Latin and the Greek classics. So the Romantic writers, they rejected this neoclassical style of writing. Rather, they focused on plain language, simple language that was just meant for the common people. If you look at the writings of the neoclassical age, we see that the writers, they mainly focused on aristocratic class. Okay. Even their writings were quite complex to be understood by common people. So the Romantic writers, they started to write for the common people and in the simple and plain language that could be understood by the common people. They started to emphasize on emotions, feelings, and subjectivity. Subjectivity, that is personal feelings and opinions. Rather than sticking on to certain rules and regulations, they started to focus on individualism and subjectivity. So it was a revolt against logic and rationality of the Enlightenment era, which followed certain rules and regulations even in writing. The major theme that the Romantic writers included in their writings was nature. Nature was the main thing. Love for nature and emphasis on nature. So the poets idealized the rural life, the common people. Nature was a place for truth and spiritual beauty. As I already said, nature was not just a part of environment for the Romantic writers, but it was a place for truth and spiritual beauty. Nature was the ultimate truth. And nature was also let's say, a gateway to connect to the divine that we see in one best example would be Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, where he sees nature when he is just a boy, he sees nature just as a part of the environment. But later, when he reaches his adolescence, he sees nature as something that lifts up his spirituality, nature as something that connects him to the divine or the transcendent. And the key elements used in writing, that was imagination and creativity. Unlike the pseudo-classicists who were just imitating the classics, they started to give freedom to the imagination and their creativity. So there is a term coined by Coleridge in his Biographia Literaria, where he says, coined this term, willing suspension of disbelief, where the readers, when they read, they have that acceptance of the supernatural or the fancy or the imaginative thing or the fantastical elements in literature. So this way, the readers can set aside their logic and reasoning and everything, the rules and regulations and the order, and they can focus on supernatural or the fantastical elements presented in the writings. Then free verse started to gain popularity. So poets of the Romantic period, they started to reject that strict poetic meters of the neoclassical era, like heroic poetry. Rather, they started to focus on free verse. Free verse is a poetic form where no meter and rhyme scheme is followed. So free verse started to gain popularity. So now we move on to the major writers of the period. Number one being William Wordsworth. Wordsworth, he's the pioneer, and he, along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, published a collection of poems that is called The Lyrical Ballads in 1798. It is a collection of poems. It also marked the beginning of the Romantic age. The example I was giving, Tintern Abbey, where Wordsworth talks about his spirituality, the nature lifting up his spirituality, nature being a connection to the something divine or transcendent, that is also part of the Lyrical Ballads. And some of the other works by Wordsworth is the prelude. I told you about this thing also, how nature has nurtured him from childhood to adolescence. The prelude, Solitary Reaper, the very famous Daffodils, Ode on the Intimations of Immorality, Ode to Duty, collection of Lucy poems. Next, we have Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He is very much renowned for his significant contributions as a poet and also a critic. He is best known for his poem that is The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, and this is the best example of focus on individual experience, nature, and also the supernatural. He also made important contributions to literary criticism, like Biographia Literaria, where he talks about imagination, fancy, primary and secondary imaginations, and also to philosophy and theology. His other literary works are Kubla Khan, Christabel, Frost at Midnight, and Dejection and Ode. Other writers are Lord Byron. Byron is also very famous for his contributions to this romantic literature, and he was also the key figure in the romantic movement. And he's also known for his passionate, melancholic, and individualistic style. Childe Harold's Pilgrimage and Don Juan are his most famous writings. It explores the themes of love, loss, and human condition. Next, we have P.B. Shelley, Percy Bysshe Shelley. He is also known for his contributions to romantic literature. He was also a key figure in the romantic movement. His poems like Ozymandias, Ode to West Wind, very famous, To a Skylark, as well as his longer works such as Prometheus Unbound and Adonais are the significant contributions to the romantic literature. Next, we have the very famous John Keats. Keats is considered to be the second generation poets. First generation being including Wordsworth, Coleridge and all. Keats belongs to the second generation, the younger poets. He is also a prominent figure along with Byron and P.B. Shelley. And he's celebrated as a leading English romantic poet. He's very much renowned for his vivid imageries, sensuous appeal in his poetry. And he's known for his odes such as Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode to Autumn, and Ode to Nightingale. All of these are very famous writings of John Keats. Next, we also have novelists. It is said that novels started to gain prominence, or novels were very famous during the Victorian era, which is which succeeds Romantic age, but novels started to gain prominence from the Romantic age itself. So we have some of the novelists here, like very famous Jane Austen, whose works are really very romantic. Her notable works are Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Mansfield Park, and Persuasion. Another novelist we have, Sir Walter Scott. He also wrote historical novels like Waverley, Heart of Midlothian, Bride of Lammermoor, Ivanhoe, and there are many others. And another very famous, that is Mary Shelley, and she's known for his horror science fiction. And the best example is Frankenstein. Then we also have some of the prose writers. Charles Lamb, he's an essayist and a poet and antiquarian, person who deals with rare antique books. Okay. So he is also best known for his Essays of Elia. It is a collection of essays and it is written in 2 volumes. Okay. That is Essays of Elia and The Last Essay of Elia. And he's also well known for a children's book. And one example would be Tales from Shakespeare, which he wrote with his sister. Another one we have, that is Thomas de Quincey. He's an English writer, essayist, literary critic also, and he's best known for his Confessions of an English Opium Eater, which was written in 1821. So other notable works of Thomas de Quincey are Knocking on the Gate of Macbeth and The English Mail Code. Okay, next we have William Hazlitt. He is an English essayist. He's a drama and literary critic also. He's a painter and a social commentator and also a philosopher. So his notable works are Characters of Shakespeare's Play. It is a book on criticism where he talks about the characters invented by Shakespeare in his plays. Another one is Round Table and Table Talk. Both of these are collection of essays. So to sum up, Romantic Age celebrated emotion, imagination, and individualism. And the writers, they shifted their focus from reason to depths of human feeling and creativity, imaginations, and emotions. They saw nature as a spiritual force, as I mentioned earlier, not just as the part of the environment, but nature was a guide, a healer, and a source of truth for the Romantic writers. It was also a rebellion against conformity. So the Romantic writers, they started to question social norms, industrialization, the evils brought in by industrialization, and rigid traditions favoring freedom and personal vision, that is subjectivity. Then, the timeless influence of a Romantic Age. The ideals of the Romantic Age continue to shape modern poetry also, art and thought. It emphasizing on authenticity, passion, and the power of the imagination. So I'd like to conclude by quoting the very famous definition given by Wordsworth in his preface to the Lyrical Ballads that was published in 1800, where he says, "Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility." Thank you.